Welcome, everyone, to Seven Quotes With, a podcast all about life and leadership and everything in between those lines. Our guests share the quotes that have shaped their lives and fueled their motivation and guided their leadership. Each episode explores 7 handpicked quotes that highlight life lessons and personal philosophies. I'm your host, Jaime Oikle. Joining me today is good friend and colleague Roger Beaudoin of Restaurant Rockstars. Roger and I collaborate in the restaurant B2B space. And shoot, Roger, I probably interviewed 40 plus times over the years at this point, but folks, never like this, never behind the scenes, never outside of the work environment and the work domain. So sure, we're going to touch on restaurants, right? It's a big part of your story, but I'm really looking forward to digging into beyond that, other parts of your life and what's built you into the leader that you are and that you've become. So before digging into the quotes themselves, why don't you give folks a little introduction and we shall go.
Okay, Roger Beaudoin. I'm a 30-year hospitality professional. I host the weekly Restaurant Rockstars podcast. I started my first restaurant with no restaurant experience 30 years ago and had a tremendous amount of success because I applied systems and business skills that a business that's not traditionally run by MBAs. So we sell online training systems around the world. We have the podcast. I personally coach restaurants, but I have a passion for the industry. Love talking shop with operators. Love collaborating with you, Jay. You know, we do a quarterly webinar, live virtual series that we've been doing for years now that I really enjoy. So, giving back to an industry that's been really good to me is one of my passion projects.
Yeah. So, and we're going to get into some of the other stuff that's passionate for you. And before I want to do this, because I'm curious, we've never talked about this question, but before we start, we're going to hit a number of things on your journey, but what do you think 10-year-old Roger, 12-year-old Roger Beaudoin, what did he want to be? Where did he want to go? Like, what was that dude like?
I really didn't have a clue about what I wanted to do. I had a real passion for motorcycles and cars at a young age, my dad bought me a snowmobile when I was a little kid. He bought me mini bikes and it turned into like dirt bike racing. And then I got into skiing at a very young age because we had a ski area in our hometown. I was age 10. And I never really thought that any of these things would lead to a career. I didn't really think about careers, but there was a pivotal point at a later age where I finally figured out what I wanted to be when I was graduating from high school. I wanted to be a commercial airline pilot, okay? And so I applied to all these flying schools around the country. I got accepted to 2 or 3 of them. And then the one that I planned to go to was in Daytona Beach, Florida. It's a pretty famous aviation school. And I'm like 3 weeks out from going to college for the first time. And my parents and I are at this cocktail party and there's a commercial airline pilot there. And my parents are talking to him and they get in a conversation and they say, yeah, my kid wants to do that. He's going to such and such college to learn. And the pilot looks over at me and he says, how old is that kid anyway? And my parents said, oh, he's 6'4". And the guy says, well, did you know that there's a height restriction for commercial airlines and the military of 6'4"? And if he's only 16 or 17 years old, he could be 7 feet tall by the time he graduates. He'll never get a job. So what happened? My parents pulled the plug. The deposits were paid. And literally, I'm not going to Daytona Beach, Florida. Dreams dashed. I had to go to 2 years of community college and just what the hell just happened to me? So that was a pivotal point in my life. And then just out of the air, my mother ended up going to business school when she went to college. She went to Bryant College in Rhode Island. And I just pulled it out of the air. Says, I guess I'll go look at Bryant College because I don't know what else to do. And I studied business. So in a way, that kind of shaped the rest of my life. But I didn't know as a younger person. I was just an adventure kid. I was into, bikes and cars and just doing cool stuff and skiing. And a lot of that stayed with me to this day.
Well, I do. Yeah, I definitely, I have some notes on it. I wanted to talk about skiing at some point. I know you're a car guy. I wanted to mention that at some point, but man, it never would have crossed my mind either that there's a height restriction. And imagine that you're sitting there and this guy points it out to you. It's a good thing. It's a good thing. It's actually good that your folks met him because you could have been a year into the program or 2 and then found out later. So,
well, I am 6'6" now. So I did grow. I didn't get to be 7 feet. But you know what? There is a silver lining here. It was heartbreaking at the time. And I do travel quite a bit, but I don't enjoy flying. So I can't imagine being stuck in a cockpit and now I got to fly to Bangkok, Thailand, and I'm in the air for 13 or 40 hours. It's like, that would kill me now. I hate it. So in a way, it was a good thing. Yeah. But I wouldn't have known that then.
Nah, you wouldn't have known. You wouldn't know. So let's go. Let's go into the quotes. This one will kick us off. I'm going to pop them onto the screen. Let's read them because we don't know if folks are going to be watching or listening. So if you can do me a favor and read them as they come up.
Yeah. There's no finish line in life and business. And I've always believed that. And when you're a young person in college, you're really impatient and you want to make $1 million and you've got all these aspirations, but you don't realize necessarily that life is a series of ups and downs. You're going to hit obstacles. You're going to hit disappointments. You're going to have triumphs. You're going to have tragedies. You're going to have disappointments and everything along the way. And that is life. But you never know, 10, 20 years from now, some really amazing thing could still be on your horizon, whether that's in business or in life, and you just never know where you're going to end up. So I've always said there's really no finish line, and it doesn't matter. You can start a zillion-dollar company at 60 or 70 or 80 years old, and there's so many people in history that failed numerous times, like Thomas Edison, and lots of people that are famous now that got really, really, notorious for changing the world, had multiple failures before they got there. So I always try to remember that there's no finish line. Don't be impatient. And one of the mistakes I made earlier in my career was I was chasing money. I went to business school. It was a really competitive place. Everyone thought they were going to be the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, or they're going to be some, amazing entrepreneur. And I chased that, and it was very, very elusive to me. And I didn't necessarily follow what was in my heart. I followed what I thought would be very lucrative, and that was a huge mistake for me. Yeah. So I'm still trying to figure it out.
Yeah, well, you're still trying to figure out. I was going to say, every time I talk to you, Roger, there's always something new, right? You're keeping busy. You're doing a lot of successful things over the years, and yet there's that fire to pick up a new idea, go down a new direction. What else is kicking for you these days? What are you excited about? What are you looking forward to?
Pivots, I guess. I do the consulting thing and the coaching thing. We sell online products, but it's like I really want to get more involved with something bigger than myself that follows all of my passions, whether that's in the ski industry or the hospitality space or even something I haven't thought of yet. What's the next thing for me? What can I be doing for the next 5 years of my life? So I opened restaurants and I ran successful restaurants for 20 years. And then I started Restaurant Rockstars. We've been doing this for 13 years. And you never want to feel like you're getting stagnant. You always want to evolve in your career and take on new challenges. And what's the next biggest thing? I don't know what that is, but I'm looking for it.
Yeah. Well, this one we'll slide right into it. This next quote kind of pushes us to what we might not be ready for. What do you got?
Yeah, this mostly goes to adventure. Like I've done some really crazy things in my life, whether that be mountain climbing in Switzerland or scuba diving with sharks and shipwrecks and all kinds of stuff. I could tell you a story about going to Switzerland for the first time when I was in high school on a ski club trip and going out of bounds where I should have never gone, where I could have fallen into a crevasse or getting taken out by an avalanche just because it was there. And I was just like, first time in Europe, and like, wow, I'm an expert skier. I can handle that. And that was probably the first adventure. And then I just started doing things that other people didn't do just because I wanted to be part of them. They seemed exciting and adventurous and all this stuff. And, I do these things. And that's where the quote comes from. If you don't have the courage to do them, you'll never see what's on the other side.
Yeah. We didn't read it clearly in the beginning, but I'll do that now. I mean, do the thing that scares you the most. The best things in life are on the other side of that fear, and it's true. And so we're not going to post it in here as we're talking live, but I'm going to find from your feed, or I'll have you send me a picture of you. I know you've climbed mountains, you do the ice climbing, you still do that stuff. You're always looking for those sort of adventures. So I want to put that. I want to put a couple of those pictures out there. But what other adventures come to mind that follow this?
Well, I've done some silly things that I wouldn't repeat. I've been on scuba diving trips around the world and stuff. And I was following this other person that invited me on this trip, and he was really into spear fishing. And he would be like, I would just swim in, I got back in, I learned how to scuba dive in college, and then I was out of it for many, many years. And then, And then so many years later, I decided to get back into it. I met this guy that was really into it, and he invited me on this dive trip to the Bahamas, and now he's spearfishing and he's attracting sharks with all these dead fish, and they're following us, So I'm like, yikes. And then we went to Belize one time, and we hired a dive guide who was like this young 20-something kid, and he takes us to this underwater cave that got really, really narrow and really, really small, and you literally had to crawl across the sand, underneath and your tank is banging the rocks above you, and it's this really, really claustrophobic tight space, and there's no way out except straight through to the other side, and there's a person or two in front of you, and there's persons behind you, so you can't back up, and you got so much air, and it's like if somebody has a problem in there, you're stuck. And I'm thinking to myself today, why did I ever do that?
Yeah.
So there's just so many examples of things that I'm proud of today, that I have had the experiences, but I wouldn't repeat them.
Well, you could certainly, I was just writing down here, your next book title could be Ways I Could Have Died by Roger Beaudoin. that could
then, well, I survived a near fatal rock climbing fall back in 2009, where I literally fell 70 feet off a vertical cliff face due to pilot error entirely on my part. And I should be dead or paralyzed. I should not have survived this, and somehow miraculously I did. And so I had numerous surgeries and a 2-year recovery and all that kind of stuff, but I'm really proud of the fact that it didn't stop me from going back and doing more of that same stuff, more cautiously, learning from the mistake, of course, but not being too afraid to say, oh, I'm never doing that again. So, there's a learning in that. And that there goes the quote. It's like, do what scares you. And as long as you take a reasonable amount of precaution and you train properly, there's some pretty amazing things on the other side of that fear that I wouldn't change, in the future. I would do certain things again that I've done. And then there's things I wouldn't do again.
Absolutely. Well, I'm glad you made it through that, and we had a chance to meet and do all the stuff we've done over the years. Let's go to the business world a little bit. We'll go into restaurants here, your restaurant world a little bit, with quote number 3. Managers delegate, but true leaders empower their teams to greatness. And we've done a lot of webinars, right? And we talk about operating successful restaurants and all the topics you can imagine. But I always kind of feel that when you talk about this topic, you show a little extra passion, a little extra excitement of building the teams, the people equation. What do you think?
Well, as young people, and we start to get our first jobs, or even throughout our career, depending on our age, we have had good bosses, we've had bad bosses. And that's why I don't like the word boss. I don't like the word manager. I don't like the word delegate, because just because someone holds the title of manager, it doesn't mean that they're competent to lead, they're experienced to lead, that they motivate their people to top performance. That's a leader in my book. And I don't like the word delegate, because anyone can tell someone what to do or even how to do it. But true leaders empower their teams to greatness. They recognize talent, they develop that talent. They're not the boss that barks orders. They never criticize people, they critique, they shape performance, they give people, they give them reasons, or not reasons, but room to make mistakes, and then inspire them to take on new challenges within the business that actually improves it. And that's empowerment. And then there should be some sort of an incentive or reward for doing so. And after starting 5 restaurants from scratch and having hundreds of employees across those restaurants over, a 23-year period, I had the greatest success with low turnover, building what I call the dream team staff, because of that framework, that template of true leadership, accountability, recognition, and rewards, and building what I call the dream team. And it can be achieved, but so many operators are the boss and they just expect certain things. And we set people up to fail sometimes unless we truly lead them. And so that's a big disappointment for me to see that in restaurants. And, when you're a guest in a restaurant, you can see a place that's running on all 8 cylinders, where you've got a team that has chemistry and respect and teamwork, and they know their products and they know the restaurant and they're proud to be there. And then you can see those places that are controlled chaos with lots of seat players running around, and you're having a less than perfect experience. So that's the difference, I think. Leaders empower their teams to greatness.
What about the pain of learning how to do that well? Because, day one out of the gate, restaurant number 1, You may have thought some of these ideas, you may have learned some of these ideas, you've experienced some in your own jobs, but I'm sure you weren't great at it day one.
No, certainly not.
How did you learn to get better at that empowering process? Where did you pick it up from? How do you think about it?
Well, you're a big reader. I can tell by your bookshelf, and we have conversations about books all the time. But I've got this book. We've talked about it before, and it's called The 1 Minute Manager. But you can see I've crossed out the word manager, and I call it The 1 Minute Leader.
Yeah.
And I recommend this to anyone because when I was just starting my first restaurant and I needed to establish these systems and I knew I wanted low turnover and I wanted great people that delivered amazing experiences, I just picked up this book, and you can see it's such a quick read. It's like 100 pages and you flow through it. But the essential premise behind the book is we don't criticize people, we critique them, but we really praise people, because everyone works for a paycheck, of course, but people really thrive on knowing that they're contributing to something greater than themselves and that their opinion and that their contribution matters. So what we do with this book is they call it the 1 Minute Manager because you give someone a praise for doing something great, for going above and beyond the scope of the job, for showing initiative. That's just the title of the book. It doesn't have to be 60 seconds. It could be a 10-second pat on the back like, hey, Joe, love what you just did there. Thanks for working here. And then it makes that person feel really good. And that, in a way, is leadership in and of itself. But then when you notice something going sideways and someone not perhaps meeting an expectation, you give them a 60-second or a 10-second critique, not a criticism. Now, we praise people in public, we critique them in private. We never want to critique someone in front of a guest or in front of another team member. But again, it could be 10 seconds, 60 seconds, but you simply continue to reinforce positive behavior versus negative behavior. And that sort of formed the framework for accountability for me. So without getting too deep into this, I have a template for leadership, but it really starts with a career description. I always called it a career description versus a job description because I never wanted my people to think of it as just a job. Oh, I'll do this for a couple of weeks or a couple of months, and then I'll go find something else. No, I want to give you a clear path if you want it to move up in the organization. I'm going to have multiple restaurants. You could be the leader of my next place for all we know,
Mm-hmm.
And that worked really well for me. So accountability came with a career description that clearly spelled out what we expected in each responsibility of that particular position. And I've said this many times in speaking with you, but I always had a blank line next to each of those responsibilities. And the blank line was the accountability. So I would sit down with a person, we'd go over their career description, and I would make it very clear, line by line, what your responsibilities were and what my expectations were in that gig. And I'd ask two questions. Do you understand what we expect? And can and will you do this to the best of your ability after you've been trained? And of course, they're going to say yes. One, they understand. If they don't understand, they can ask a question. You can clarify, but you get the idea. But if they say yes, then they initial the line. So now you, as the expert in your restaurant, as the leader, see things going smooth for 2-3 weeks or whatever. But then all of a sudden, one of those things starts to slip on their responsibilities. And that's when you pull them aside. And instead of being the boss and saying, hey, you're not doing what I asked you to do, go out there and, being the boss and being that overarching person, I would always sit down and say, you said you could do this, and I'm not seeing you do this. And instead of, I would put the onus on them saying, how and what will you do to get your performance back on track? And then I'd sit there and wait for the answer. And they had to correct the behavior immediately. And there's the accountability. And then the last part of the career description always had, if you do a stellar job on all these responsibilities, where can you go next? And maybe sometimes it is a promotion, but you don't always have a new gig for someone, but you can give them an additional responsibility to take on to improve your business for an incentive. And I did that numerous times with numerous people without actually giving them a promotion. Some people, sure, they got promoted to be leaders in new restaurants, but some people just, kitchen leader, put an inventory system in place and I'll give you an incentive, or track this, or start catering, or, increase our takeout and delivery business.
Yeah.
I mean, these are
So
little
many
things
opportunities.
that aren't a position. They're just additional responsibilities that someone can do to improve the business and get an incentive for doing so. So that's kind of how it works.
Yeah, man. Listen, it's basic stuff. At the end of the day, it's it's a lot of it is this human decency component, but that formula
That's right.
of praising in public and critiquing in private is absolutely the number one thing you can do. countless examples from everyone's life where you were critiqued in front of a group of people. And how did you feel? Oh my gosh, you felt the worst. It's the worst feeling to get,
It's demeaning. Yeah.
negative talk
Yeah.
in front of other people. And a lot of times that leads to an unrecoverable event. Like it's going to probably lead to them leaving 2 weeks, 2 months down the road when you have such a negative experience. And that can be easily avoided. Conversely, hearing the positives about yourself in front of your peers, there is nothing more powerful than that. So, you're Roger in your setting in the restaurant world where you're having that meeting with, it's just the pre-shift, maybe there's 20 people on hand, and you talk about, you openly say how Sarah did such a great job last week with the guest, and you have the feedback post from Yelp. And everybody hears that. She feels like $1 million. It cost you nothing. The rest of the team says, I want to have that experience. I want to give. So now maybe the next time there's a meeting, they have the opportunity to get that feedback. So that absolutely is a terrific formula. The accountability stuff you went through, everybody can use that in their job. Maybe you have a sports team. Maybe you have, another organization in your community. You can use that sort of simple accountability. You said you do this, you initialed here, you're not doing it. Where are we going to go from here? So any other kind of thoughts on that one before we keep rolling?
No, you summarized it very well. And you brought up some things that I didn't say or think of. So you definitely brought that full circle and closed the loop.
Excellent. All right. Well, let's go to quote 4. This is good for you too. We touched on a little bit of this, but life is not a spectator sport. You can't just watch. You got to participate. And you do it, man. You keep busy. What you got?
There's a big pride factor. I think it keeps me youthful and young. Like I'm 63 years old, but I feel in many ways that I can hold my own with people like half my age or a third my age because I'm constantly doing things that keep me out there. And I think that life is a balance. It's not, I have always believed it's work hard, play hard, and find a life balance, and don't miss out on your kids' soccer games and graduations because you'll always regret it. I never heard anyone say, I wish, they're on their deathbed, they're at the throes of, the end of their life, and they say, oh, I wish I spent more time in the office. Nobody ever said that. So, yeah. And then the certain things that become passions of yours that could shape your vocation, your life's career. For me, it was skiing. I started skiing, I mentioned, at age 10, and I went to Switzerland, and I had all these experiences which led to, the climbing thing and all that. But who would have known that those adventures would lead me to starting this business that became so iconic that it dominated its competition and still does to this day. And now I'm a customer there, but it's all based on memorabilia from, vintage skiing from decades, from the 60s, 70s, 80s. You walk into this place and there's memorabilia and skis and boots and helmets and everything hanging from the ceiling and trail signs. And it's become this iconic thing that's been written up in all the major magazines, even New York Times and the Boston Globe, because it's such a destination. But it all came from a passion from 10 years old. And you started this by saying, what did you want to be when you were 10? Well, I would have never had an idea that I would ever be in the restaurant business.
Right.
But it's just what happens to you. And you follow your dreams and they lead to things. So I think that's why life is not a spectator sport. I like to get involved. And if I have a passion for something, like I don't just sit on the sidelines and watch my heroes play it. I got to get in the action and do it myself.
Good. Yeah. And Roger and I are connected on Facebook of the world. And so I see him out there skiing. You get on the slopes, buddy. How many days is your target this year to be on the snow?
Yeah. Last year was like 65 or 66 days. And I know people that exceed 100 days a year, which is pretty extraordinary. I mean, we go up on weekends mostly only. So yeah, I mean, I always try to get one more day in, but when I fell off that cliff, I missed a whole season and I didn't get any days in. So I'm happy for any day I get when it's great with friends and good weather and good snow. But sure, getting the 60s would be great.
Thinking about, you've done so much stuff, but what else is on the bucket list?
Well, it's funny because I'm kind of a creature of habit, or I look back on the past. Okay. And I mentioned the motorcycle thing when I was a kid. So when I sold my restaurants, I moved to Sun Valley, Idaho,
Hmm. Hmm.
and there was a motocross or a dirt bike track down the street from my house. I mean, I was surrounded by these beautiful canyons, and I mountain bike still to this day quite a bit. And I love the mountain bike out there. And you could mountain bike for miles and miles and spend all day going from canyon to canyon and all that kind of stuff. But here's this dirt bike track. And I would always stop and watch these riders and flying around the track and getting air off the jumps and the
Hmm.
turns and spitting the dirt in the air and racing each other. And it brought me back to my childhood. So I said, you know what? I got to get a dirt bike. So I did. I got a dirt bike in my late 50s,
There you
and
go.
got back on the horse. And I actually got one for my kids, and they used to ride with me out there on that track when it was safe to do so. So that was really cool. So then what lately happened, I turned 63 last October, and I got a skateboard because when I was a kid, I used to
Ah,
skateboard a lot, and suddenly it's like I'm trolling, YouTube, watching videos, and I went to eBay and I bought a skateboard. And now all of a sudden it's like I'm riding this board like I'm surfing, like I'm 10 years old again, and I'm doing that again. And I never lost the skills, and I just jumped on the thing like I did it yesterday, even though I was 10 years old the last time I did it. So I'm always trying to reinvent myself, but it's not always something new. A lot of times it's something I've done before.
yeah, amazing. Yeah, dude. I wonder if hey, when you went to the skateboard, did you go old school or did you get one that has the motor in it and all that fun
No,
stuff?
no, no, no.
Old
It's an
school.
old school. It's kind of a long board, and it's
Yeah,
more
yeah,
of a slalom type board. It's not a
yeah.
freestyle. I'm not going to get into swimming pools and do banks and all that kind of stuff. That would put me in the hospital, of course. But
Yeah.
it's like I like to find really smooth pavement and really somewhat safe areas where I can get going pretty good, but I can really do these swooping turns, and it's just very fulfilling to do so. In terms of the bucket list, I've always wanted to go to race driver school because I'm kind of
Oh yeah,
I'm a Formula
yeah.
One enthusiast. So one of these days, I'm going to go learn to drive race cars. So that's on the bucket list. Whether it happens or not,
Yeah.
we'll see.
Yeah, that would be a fun one. That would be a fun one for sure. All right, let's go
So
to quote number 5. Read it for us.
yeah, leaders recognize talent, they develop it, and then they get out of the way. So this again goes back to that. We just had the discussion about managing delegation and leadership and empowerment, but there's three types of employees in any business, no matter what, type of business it is. There's the A team, the B team, and the C team. And you really want to, as harsh as it sounds, it's like your business will not thrive if you employ C players. Okay. And unfortunately, today we still see the now hiring signs everywhere. And if you get anyone at all, you're going to get a C player that was someone else's nightmare, someone else's headache, who was what I call a paycheck collector. What you really need to do is focus on the A and the B team. The A's are those people you wish you had 20 more of. They great personalities. They have a passion for hospitality. They love making friends with your guests. They're really business ambassadors. They drive traffic into your restaurant. And you really need to recruit people just like that. And I used to always say, who do you know that is looking for a place that where people are recognized, they're incentivized, they really love meeting new people. And I would incentivize people for bringing me those types of employees, and then I would incentivize the new recruit if they lasted 60 days. But it's so important to look at those A and B people and don't pigeonhole them in the job they're doing today, but
Hmm.
try to think ahead and say, where can this person go next, because they've got a certain skill set that I really want to employ in my business that's really going to help improve the business. And that's recognizing the talent piece. And then you develop that talent. I've often told this story of this 15-year-old dishwasher I had so long ago in my very first restaurant 30 years ago. And the kid just had something special. He had a fire. He really had a passion for hospitality. And I didn't know it at the time that he wanted to own his own restaurant. But he within 3 weeks, he was asking me, what can I close the place up for you so you can go home early? Can I set the alarm? Can I make sure that all the lights are, all that kind of stuff? Can I send the credit card batch to the bank? And I said, okay, I'll trust you to do that. And the kid never let me down. And then 2 weeks later, he's like, can you teach me this? Can you teach me that?
Hmm.
Can you show me the numbers? How does a business work? And it was a point of pride and satisfaction, really fulfilling for me to kind of show this kid all the stuff about running a business at age 15. I'm like, that's really remarkable. And I didn't know where he'd end up. He ended up being my kitchen leader in 2 of my restaurants. You know, he ran the kitchen, he did all the ordering, he did all the scheduling. He was super good with his costing. He was just a remarkable person. And then he finally left 15 years later to do what? To start his own restaurant.
Nice. Good.
Because I mentored this kid over the course of 15 years. So that is gratifying to me. So again, recognizing talent, figuring out where could this person go next year, next month, wherever. And I want to emphasize that it's okay if you've got a stellar employee doing a stellar job and they don't want to do anything else. And I've had many team members like that. I had a line cook that stayed with me for 15 or 16 years also. And this kid could have 30 steaks on the grill and cook every one to perfection. Like nothing ever came back. And he was just the grill master. And it's like, stay there. I love you there. You know, it's like, I didn't want this kid to do anything else. Thankfully, he didn't want to move out of that position. So it's okay to have people that don't want to move up, but just know in your business that in many cases, people will leave if they don't see future opportunities. So recognizing talent, developing it, and then giving them room to fail and just getting out of the way. And you'd be surprised at how they will astonish you because they want to. They don't want to let you down. They know that you're trusting them to do something spectacular, and in many cases, they're going to deliver that. So that's kind of what that's all about.
Yeah, good stuff, Raj. I made a note while you were talking about that aspect of getting out of the way. I think that is a hindrance for a lot of business operators, that unwillingness to get out of the way and let people develop, let people have opportunities to both succeed and fail because they want to control everything. How do you, because you coach a lot as well. Roger is a consultant and coach to folks. How do you encourage folks to get themselves out of the way?
Well, understanding the empowerment piece and how I don't want to micromanage people because that happens far too often. I want to trust you. I want to know that you have good judgment and that you've proven yourself in the past. Therefore, I have very high confidence that anything I ask you to do in the future will be to the best of your ability and we'll both be better for it. So I would explain that. You know, whenever I'm recognizing talent and I'm saying, you know what, you're doing a stellar job in all these responsibilities, and I think you could do this if you're interested in doing it, we have a conversation. And I let them know I'm not going to stand over you and, you know, and watch you every step of the way. If you have questions, please come to me. If you need help with something, we have resources to help you. But I really want you to try and do your best to get there on your own without needing someone's support. And I think, and that's what makes people step out of their comfort zone a little bit and take on a little bit more. And then they feel so good about themselves when they know that they've accomplished most of that on their own without someone really every step of the way. So yeah, a little bit of coaching, certainly. But I really like to push people out of the nest and really see what they've got and let them develop their talents and their skills so that they get that satisfaction. And in very, very few cases did anyone ever let me down or not accomplish something that they set out to achieve. And that kept the longevity thing up. It's pretty amazing. You know, I go back to that flagship restaurant on weekends sometimes. I was in there twice in the last month. And I was served by one person that I hired 28 years ago. She's still there. And then last weekend, and this is amazing, right? Here's a server who's been there 25 years and she only works 1 day a week. She works a double and she makes somewhere between $1,600 and $1,800 every Saturday in my place. And that's all she does.
What?
Right? So she's making like 75 grand a year working 1 day a week. And she rocks the place. Like she absolutely rocks the place, but she's an icon, you know? And it's like, that all started with the Sales Stars program I developed so long ago. She is a star in the Sales Stars program and an example to others. And she was a mentor. She still mentors people. And that's the chemistry. That's the spirit. It's an experience. You walk in any of those restaurants that I ran and you have an experience. It's like no order takers allowed. It's like you're there to dazzle every guest and turn them into repeat guests. And that's what they do so well. And that's a competitive advantage. And I'm so proud of that now. But I go in there as a guest in my restaurant and I get served by people I hired decades ago. And they still got the magic that they had when I hired them. It's amazing. That's gratifying.
Yeah, Raj. First of all, thank you for sharing that. I love that aspect, and we could talk all day. We have had whole webinars on the order taker philosophy, so we won't go there. But having people that can be a superstar in your team is an unbelievable power. So let's go to quote number 6, where you say age is just a number, not a lack of ability. This goes both ways. Young folks, old folks,
it does
do
go
stuff.
Both ways.
You don't judge a book by its cover. Folks can be super talented in different ways, and we're all guilty of this, right? We all tend to judge people based on assumptions we have, this, that, the other, and this is one of those categories where we judge people. How do you? What do you got?
So that's about being open-minded and knowing that your talents are not limited necessarily by your knowledge. They're limited by your own limitations. And if you have fear about something, you either overcome that fear or you're going to be stuck in the same place forever. So I've always been a late bloomer in life. Things did not come easy. Things don't fall out of the sky. Like some people around us are super successful. Seemingly, yes, they're smart. Maybe they're intelligent. Maybe they're college educated, whatever it is. But it's like they make magic happen, however it happens, over and over again. Like there's numerous examples of serial entrepreneurs that have sold multiple companies for multiple millions. And then there's just as smart, intelligent people that have had the same education. What's the difference between this person and that person? And who's to say that they can't achieve something at age 70 that someone else accomplished at age 25? It's all possible. You're only limited by your own thinking and your own willingness or unwillingness to learn something new and to follow a passion that might be life-changing for you. So I've always believed that. So who knows what's around the next corner? But it's kind of like putting yourself, in the room and just building. I didn't even coin this term. I went to a retreat last summer with Jesse Itzler, who's a famous entrepreneur, and I spent 3 days with 30 people at his house in Connecticut, and it was a full immersion experience. But he's got this term he calls the life resume, and most people's resumes are, okay, I went to this college and I did this for so many years, and this has been my career path and all that kind of stuff, and they use it to get a job. A life resume goes far beyond your vocation and what you did. It's what you did with your family. It's maybe the adventures or the travels you took, or the knowledge or the classes you took that led to a passion. Maybe you're a painter or a sculptor or, a mountain climber, whatever it is. It's like all these things that you look back on in your life when someday you don't do those things anymore, but you've got a lifetime of memories. So that goes back to life is not a spectator sport, but that's kind of how I feel about that. Age is just a number. And like you said, it goes both ways.
It does. And if you think you are too young or too old for this or that, and you are delaying for whatever reason, we happen to be talking in January. I don't know when this is going to air, but if you said, oh, let me wait for January because that's a good time, or let me wait for the beginning of next month, the beginning of next week, you're just waiting, right? You're procrastinating because you're not ready to take that step. And if it is something you want to do, then do it. Like, be passionate about it. Like, there is no reason not to do it in today's environment. You have all the tools, you have all the resources, you have all the ability to learn with this device. If this is all you have, you're set. Like, if all you have is a phone, like, you're set and you can do it. So get started. I think I spun that a little bit different way, but the point is, if you have something in your head you want to do, forget about how old you are, go do it. I think that's fair. So, all right, Raj, what, we have this one we touched on 7. We got ahead of ourselves a little bit, but this one's important, and I'll read it and talk about it because you already did a little bit. But don't miss the important moments in life. At the end, no one ever said, "I wish I spent more time in the office." And you touched on this one. People hear this one. I've seen this one. It always hits kind of hard when you read it. You're like, "Oh yeah, shit, that's true." Like, at the end of the day, like, no one's going to say, "Geez, I wish he was in the office one more day." It's not going to happen. So, me personally, I've made a point to do this. I've coached the kids. I've traveled with the kids to their events. I've gone to the plays, the events. I've missed very little on purpose. I don't regret any of that. I would do it the same way. Yep. And certainly wouldn't trade that. You have to have goals. You have to have priorities, and where they are can sometimes get skewed in life. We all chased money from time to time, but I think chasing moments and experiences is more worthwhile. How do you think about it?
I think about it two ways because perhaps we have two different types of people in the audience. Maybe we have, employees that work for other people listening to this, and then maybe we have entrepreneurs or business owners or restaurant owners listening to this. So it applies to both. So if you're an employee right now, if you work for a company, because I did too. Like we've all had jobs before we ended up where we are here. Maybe you've had one career for 30 years. Maybe you've done multiple things over years, but I've had many, many jobs before I became an entrepreneur. And I always tried to be a standout employee. I tried to be the best at whatever I did. And I always sort of reframed a job with my employer to say, hey, I'm not the average person because I'm going to be super productive. So I don't have to work from 9 to 5 just because I show up and do a job. I could probably accomplish the same thing someone else could. And maybe I only put in 4 or 5 hours, but that gave me flexibility to do things or to not miss certain things that were important because my employer knew that I was not going to drop the ball, that regardless of how many hours I worked, it was about what I accomplished, not about how many hours I spent in the office. So that's reframing something and being a standout because there's a whole lot of average people out there doing jobs and just showing up doing the same old thing. And maybe those are people that work for a living, not work for a life. They have to work because everyone needs to earn a paycheck, of course. But there's too many people in this world that absolutely hate what they do, but they're trapped in a job and they just show up 9 to 5 or whatever it is just to earn that paycheck. But if you have a passion for what you're doing, sometimes you might work a late day, but if you are really, really productive, your employer will respect that. And then you will have time. If you got a kid's soccer game, they'll say, yeah, go ahead, because you're a valued person. You want to make yourself valuable. If you're an entrepreneur, we already talked about this. It's about working on your business, not in it, chipping away 1 day a week, 2 days a week to improve that business so that you don't have to work in it 7 days a week, and empowering the people that then take on the responsibility. I've got another quote that's not even on the list, but they say you've got a system if you can walk away from your business for a day, a week, or a month. And when you come back, that place is just as successful, if not more so, because your people have your back. They run the place like they owned it and had to pay for it. And that was my experience with my restaurants. And that gave me time. I spent so much time with my kids when they were little growing up, even though I ran these restaurants. It's like I went to every playground on the planet. We went to every amusement park. We went to every soccer game, ballet recital, you name it, we did it all. And I didn't miss any of it because I could count on my team to back me up and to be there running the business like they owned it. So it applies to anybody, whether you work for someone or you work for yourself. It's like, don't miss the key moments in life because life, it's a cliche to say life goes by too fast because it just does.
It does. It does. It does. I wanted to talk about something. I didn't get to this. I thought we'd get to this. I don't want to be remiss in not getting to it. Would you agree that your wife is kind of your superpower? Like she's amazing. Like she's so incredible. How does she help you, support you? How did you guys meet? What do you got?
She's the brains behind the operation, and I'm always quick to credit her. She is a change agent where I am a comfort zone person. So I would do the same thing over and over again. I would live in the same place. I would have the same house, the same furniture, because when I get comfortable and if I have all my needs met and I'm happy with my life, it's like I don't need to change anything. She's rearranging the furniture 3 times a week, and she's constantly pushing me to do new things. So when I first met you, Jaime, which was so many years ago, I didn't even know what a webinar was. I didn't know what a podcast was.
Right.
I'm like, I was not ever really a tech person. And then my wife had the idea when we sold first of all, it was her idea to sell all the restaurants and change our life. She's like, you know what? She's like, we've been living here for 10, 11 years. It's like, we own these restaurants. We have a beautiful house. We got all this stuff, but it's like, that's not everything in life. Let's sell everything and let's cross the country in an RV and end up somewhere and change our life 360. And we did that. And then so we moved to Sun Valley, Idaho, and that's where the big skiing thing and the dirt bike track and all that came in. But it was her idea to start this company called Restaurant Rockstars. She's like, you got all this knowledge in your head. You've been running restaurants for decades. It's like, if you put an online course together that's everything you've ever learned about running a successful restaurant, we could sell it around the world. And that came to be true. And then she says, let's start a podcast. I'm like, what's a podcast? What's a webinar? I don't know. So then she pushed me to do that. Now, 470 episodes later, we have a podcast. It's like, yeah. if I just stayed me, it's like she's improved my life in so many ways. And she always has a new brainstorm. And I just say, okay, let's do it, because it's been proven so many times over. So she's the change agent,
Good.
and I just go with the flow, and life is better because of it. But yeah, I give her
Yeah.
all the credit.
Well, I'm glad we remember to bring that up because yeah,
Thank
I
you.
think
Appreciate that.
I think she's a superstar in the background that you don't always see. So the other thing,
Yeah.
you got two kids. I have three. They're similar ages to yours, but in this same realm that we're in talking about life advice and leadership advice, how have you as a parent instilled some of the things? Any quick parenting takeaways you would share with the audience?
We were not super strict parents. We guided our kids. We tried to give them good advice so that they minimized the mistakes they made, but we gave them kind of a long leash. And I think they appreciated that because we know other parents that were super strict and the kids kind of went down the wrong path. The wrong kids, got into drinking and other things. And our kids wonderfully don't have any of those bad habits. They're both motivated kids. One of them is a freshman in college. She's got some entrepreneurial skills that she obviously picked up from us, and she's studying business, which is a great thing. I totally think that's the most practical major on the planet. And then my oldest daughter did something completely different. She chose not to go to college. She didn't want to open another book, and she had a passion for real estate that came from watching the show on TV called Selling Sunset. And she got super motivated to be a high-end realtor selling
Right.
multi-million-dollar properties. So that's her focus now. And she's 20 years old, and she's with an agency that's a perfect fit. And, she's got some pretty big clients, and she's doing pretty well for herself, and she's got a competitive advantage. It's like she's a fantastic, well, she got into the TikTok thing years ago, and she followed that, and now she creates the most amazing videos with editing and music, and she brings her properties to life, which is a competitive advantage, and she's really rocking it. And she's got the social media thing down. So you got to be proud of your kids for their talents. She was an amazing mogul skier growing up. Then she turned into a racer. She became an amazing racer, and now she doesn't ski very much at all. And now she's putting all her energy in real estate. And they all have their own talents, but you got to. And we were never the kind of people to say, oh, that's an unrealistic goal. What are you thinking? Why would you want to do that? There's so many parents that say, I want you to be a doctor. I want you to be a lawyer instead of a rock star or whatever. Who knows what amazing things your kids can do if you just let them follow their passions. And they're all going to find their own way in life. They just are. So you guide them as best you can, and you help them along the way whenever you can, and you give them lots of your time and love them and be attentive to them, and they'll turn out all right. And that was certainly our case and yours too, Jim, I'm sure.
Yeah. And if you talk about your daughter who's in real estate we could go back to quote, I could pull this one down, but go back to the, where is it? Age is not a number. I mean, like she is being very quickly a superstar in that space, where traditionally you do need to be older and more experienced, but she's coming at it from a different angle, and she is zooming right into that space with very little hindrance, and that's terrific. And it is, she has this other tool that maybe someone else doesn't have, and she can be very successful. So yeah, again, a good example of age is just a number and so forth. So, hey, you gave me a book recommendation. I always like to ask for more. If you want to stick with that as the only book you love on the whole planet, you can. But if you have another book you would recommend people read, or something you're reading yourself, or so forth, lay it on us.
So another favorite book that I've read many, many times, and I guess you'd have to look up the author, but the title is Becoming Steve Jobs. And it's literally a history of Steve Jobs as a young person, and then obviously starting Apple in the garage of his adopted family's home, and then the whole trajectory of Apple, and then getting booted out of Apple and being replaced by the Pepsi CEO, and then coming back and then transforming the world with so many new devices, and then getting cancer and all that kind of stuff, and giving a speech at Stanford University before he died. And every part of the story is just super inspiring and there's so many takeaways about life and business, and a lot of the things we talked about today you will find in reading in the pages of that book. So that's always a favorite as well. And anyway, And then
Sorry, I was
yeah.
jumping out. I read the biography by Walter Isaacson on Steve Jobs, which is terrific. The book you referenced, Becoming Steve Jobs, the author of that looks like Brent Schendler,
That's the
and
one.
obviously you can find both
Correct.
of those on Amazon. But his story in particular is unbelievably fascinating. Steve Jobs, that is. So
Yes, it is.
whether you read that book or watch the documentary that's on him, you will pick up a number of lessons that you can apply in your own life. So thank you for sharing that with us. We have covered a lot. Thank you for joining me, of course.
Thank you.
We did touch on your website, but share that again, where they can find the website, the podcast, anything else you're doing that you want to share outside of that, please.
Everything is at restaurantrockstars.com, rockstars with an S. And that's coaching, that's consulting, that's our academy training system. That's all episodes of the podcast are archived there. In addition to finding it on every major podcast player, you can opt in to that podcast, meaning if you give us your email address, we'll send it to you in your email inbox every week. We record it as a video, like we're speaking face to face now, James. You can see my guests interacting with me, or audio. If you're walking the dog or driving to your place of work or business or whatever you're doing, you can watch or listen. So yeah, that's kind of a passion project. I knew you enjoy it. I enjoy it too. We meet so many cool people in this business and so many leading lights of the industry. And it's all about game improvement technology, right? Anything we interview is all about improving your restaurant business, finance, technology, guest service, marketing, all those things. We cover all those topics.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, you got to check out the podcast, check out the website. The Academy is unbelievable. It's the biggest no-brainer, I say, for restaurant operators anywhere. Jump into that. Tons of stuff. We just scratched the surface of Roger's wisdom inside the restaurant space as we talked about all these other life and leadership lessons. So thank you for doing that, Roger. Again, folks, easily find him on the web. Good starting point is restaurantrockstars.com. We'll put that in the notes. Folks, do me a favor. If you found this helpful, and hopefully you did, as we covered a lot of stuff, please subscribe to the show on YouTube or iTunes or Spotify, wherever you're listening. Just kind of take a second, hit that button, the subscribe button that's right there. Kind of click on that. Make sure you're subscribed so you do see future episodes. If you could do another quick favor, like hit the like button or rate it real quick if there's some stars. If you could give a quick review, take a couple seconds and write a couple sentences about, hey, this was great listening to this. We really appreciate that stuff. That makes the show easier to find for folks. And then if you can share it with folks, two folks that are along the same journey as you, that would be appreciated. And we will see folks next time. Thanks, Roger.
Thank you, James. Thank you, audience, for tuning in. It was great having this chat, and I wish you the best with this new show. What a great concept. 7 quotes. That's cool.